This year, we have cleaned our lines with calcium hypochlorite. In an earlier video, we showed cleaning lines with water. We found that cleaning lines with water was not sufficient. It certainly helps, but it doesn't do enough. We find that there is an issue with 3/16 tubing in the sap starts out flowing really well at the beginning of the season, but towards the end of the season it dwindles in production quite drastically. This would happen with 5/16 tubing too, or does happen with 5/16 inch tubing too. But they have found that by replacing spouts, or even better still, replacing spouts and drops, you can alleviate this and you get strong production all through the season. These replacement techniques, we've tried them on 3/16 tubing and it does not help. We've tried check valves on 3/16 tubing and that does not help. So we know we have a problem, and we think sanitation is the issue. Now, when I say this, we have not gone through a season after cleaning, and we can't really see the results. I'll describe our experiences here this year. This tubing has been used for 5+ years. We have 2,300 taps here. We put in about half of our spouts and check valve spouts, new check valve spouts is here, new stubbies. And we started out, I guess we tapped end of January, and first flows were really good. We had one line we put in completely brand new. So after the first flows, we ended up selling sap during the first flows. We couldn't possibly boil everything we produced. Then it froze for a while, and then it came back. And it came back okay, and then it started to dwindle, and the end of the season was pretty miserable. We were, in some days we made 5 gallons of syrup a day. In the meantime, I compare myself with my neighbors with 5/16 who do fairly good practice, and their end of season was pretty good. They were still flowing strong. I had one line that was brand new, as I said, and at the end of the season, that was flowing strong, showed a high vacuum of, I believe it was 26 inches. It was doing beautifully, and the other 99 lines were doing really poor, or basically zero. So obviously new tubing has an effect, and we hope that sanitation can bring the tubings back to new tubing. We have a very little information to go on. We had some experiments done by Steve Childs down at Cornell, and he found that he could use bleach at 400 parts per million. He used household bleach. And he brought in drops from the woods and cleaned the drops in the sugar house. And he found that those drops could be reused, and they were just as good as brand new drops. I don't like the idea of using household bleach. We used it extensively in the 70s, and we found that the household bleach is sodium hypochlorite, and the sodium and the chlorine, of course, give you essentially table salt when they finish reacting, and the squirrels love that salt solution. And so they would just chew on our lines like crazy. So old sugar makers will stay away from this berg at UVM. And Abby said, well, we used calcium hypochlorite, and of course that does not turn into table salt when it's done. The calcium essentially gives you a lime water solution after it dissipates. And we found that the squirrels don't particularly care for it. In fact, it's sort of bitter tasting, and I think they are put off by it. So, taking Abby's word for it, and Abby, at UVM, they found the same sort of thing. If you made a solution of 400 parts per million, brought stuff in from the woods, and soaked it for half an hour in the solution, it would kill bacteria, and things would work pretty much like new tubing. So we said, well, maybe we can apply it to our whole system. So Abby said they used an industrial food grade hypochlorite, calcium hypochlorite called Indochlor. So I went and called up the company that makes Indochlor, and I talked to a gentleman there named Tom Scherf, and he said, oh, we package this stuff in small quantities as swimming pool bleach, and we package it under the brand name of Zap It. Okay, now Indochlor comes in large quantities, like 100-pound lots. You really don't want to have large quantities of this hanging around. If it gets just a little bit of water in it, not enough to mix it up, it's very reactive and it can actually cause fires. So you really want small quantities. And since this stuff is used in swimming pools, you have small quantities, and it's in convenient 1-pound bags. If you mix 1 pound of this with 200 gallons of water, you get 400 parts per million solution. Now normally they'd mix 1 pound, for a swimming pool, they'd mix 1 pound with like 10,000 gallons of water, so you're getting a much stronger solution than the swimming pool uses. But it works well, and it's the same material as Abby was using. I called around to at least one other manufacturer of swimming pool hypochlorite, but they would not tell me what the ingredients were. They had some of their own proprietary materials, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. So I decided to do this. It's available, I think, from one place in the area. There's a swimming pool place in Plattsburgh that has it. That's a little too far to go. So we ordered it on the internet, a place called Spa Daddy, and they sent us 6 bags of it for, I believe it was $35-40. So you only need about 3 bags to do my whole system. So we're fine. So you're going to see in the sequence that we show you, we show you us weighing it out because we're going to use ½ pound per 100 gallons. We found that mixing it up into 200 gallon batches worked really well. We have a little sequence there where we filter it through a t-shirt, and this is to keep any large lunks out of the system. We didn't find that much of a problem, but this was at the advice of an old swimming pool expert, and so it's not hard to do. You could just mix the whole thing directly, though. Okay. Now the other mixture that we did is 1/8 teaspoon per 1 liter or 1 quart. A liter is slightly more than a quart. And we use this to clean the drops, and this is what we use. This is an Nalgene wash bottle. We got this from US Plastics. Notice we've taped the spout on because we found that they come off and then you lose them in the woods and you never find them again. So you can fill this up with water and then put 1/8 teaspoon. We use stainless steel spoon. I guess my daughter got them at Bed Bath & Beyond. And what happens here is a drop. This nozzle just fits right down to the drop really well. And you just squeeze it and it fills the drop up and it will actually push it down into the main line from here, cleaning everything out. So those are the two mixtures. This is the substance. This is equivalent to a food grade, exactly the same as the food grade stuff called Indochlor that the dairy industry uses pretty extensively, I guess. And we were very satisfied with it. You're going to see us with gloves and goggles, and I think when you're mixing stuff down at the tank, you want to do that. We found in the woods we would spill some on our hands and on our clothes, and it really wouldn't cause much grief. Our clothes weren't bleached from it, and so it's a lot easier. We had a little bit of fear and trepidation about this material when we first started, and certainly you should be careful with it, but it was a lot more forgiving than we thought it would be. Certainly you do not want it in your eyes. So this, we do not, again, we have not gone through a season with this. We're just going on the very little information, scientific information we have. We're going to trust Abby and Steve in their experiments and hope that we can have expanded that successfully to the bush. Visually, when we look at the lines after, everything looks clear. There's an occasional little piece of yeast caught here and there, but we don't think that's significant. And occasionally you'll see a little bit of scum on the lines that doesn't seem to come off. Hopefully that's not significant either. But basically it looks clean. We've certainly got a lot of yeast out of our main lines that have been built up for years. We think that this was worth doing, but how successful it will be, we won't be able to tell you till the end of next April. So if you want to try it, this is the best we can do right now. And this should be fine. Now, in the previous video, we showed you how to do this with water. Our rinse cycle is done with water, and our water, we have a compressor which we blow air into the line, and the water is just the pressure from the spring down at the sugar house. And we said before, the pressure from the spring down at the sugar house is about 50 psi. The advantage of the air-water mixture is it's lighter than water, and we can push the mixture up past the spring up to the top of our sugar bush. It's probably 200 feet from where we start to the top of the sugar bush, so it's a pretty good head. The pump we're using will easily go up to 100 psi. You got to be careful with it. You want to have quite a few laterals connected to it, and a smaller pump might even be better. But it has the piston pump is a high head pump, and it works pretty well for this system. Certainly other pumps would work. We just happen to have one because we use this Pumpco piston pump for our our syrup filter, and so it's a double purpose. We're going to clean our lines now with a bleach solution. This bleach solution is not household bleach, but is calcium hypochlorite. It's used in industrial and food operations. It's also used in swimming pool cleaning. It's the advantage of this is that it's based on calcium, not sodium. So the end product will be lime, not salt. If you have a long-time experience like I have, you know that when you put bleach in the lines like we did in the 70s, you get salt and then you get squirrels. This is the apparatus that we've shown before in another video. We described this accurately. This mixes the air with the water. This is my main lines coming down. This would pump the stuff up into the main lines. We have these hydron chlorine indicators, and this will go up to 200 parts per million. It's jet black at 200 parts per million. That's probably good enough to indicate that we got chlorine. We're going to go up to 400 parts per million here. The chlorine solution after a week or so in our lines is pretty much dissipated. Ultraviolet light kills it. That comes into our translucent lines and does it in. Also, any organic material in there will kill it. And so it's not an everlasting system, everlasting thing. But in your main lines, which don't allow ultraviolet light in, they're dark, it might persist quite a bit longer. So you probably have to drain and rinse those. We're going to try to rinse everything. It's very easy to rinse the main lines, and it's very easy to rinse the laterals. It's harder to deal with the drops. The other substance we've got here is a dechlorination solution. So if we end up with stuff in the tank we want to get rid of, or if we drain stuff back from our lines into a tank and it still has bleach in it, we don't want to dump it on the ground. So we add a little bit of this until we get a reading of no reading on our paper here. So none of this is terribly expensive. It's all available. You really should have it. The other thing we have out here, safety goggles. We have gloves. Okay. You always have to add this bleach to water. Now we're going to do this, mix it up in a small quantity of water. This is an old t-shirt and baling twine. These are quite ancient drops we had left over from a few years back, and we're now thinking about putting 5/16 drops on 3/16 tubings. We may think that might alleviate some of our problems. This is simply thin-walled PVC pipe with a cap on it. Very cheap. I happen to have the pipe hanging around, even cheaper, and I had to buy the cap. So not a lot of money invested, but it's long, so that when you push these down, these things don't float. They're high-density PE, and they will stay down there. Put them in there for a half hour. That's long enough to kill everything, according to Steve Childs, and we'll take his word for it. Now we use the highly scientific, technological method of a bucket to do this. This pipe carries about 6 or 7 gallons. Now, we just push them in, and this the liquid flows right up into it. We'll later do a rinsing operation, just this with plain water. We don't like these check valves, I want to say, but there's a few places where we're going to use them again. The 3/16 check valves and these two-piece spouts for 3/16 with check valves, you can't get the spouts off the adapters. So they haven't worked. We spent a lot of money on them, but there's a few places where we use them. So I don't want to buy any more. So again, going after Steve Childs, we're going to bleach them. And we have this stainless steel basket. Some of them will float, but they'll sink. And this will clean them. And I think we'll be all right. With 3/16, especially with D&G tubing, is you can take the fittings and put them in, just boil them for a minute, and while they're still hot you can easily remove the D&G tubing from the fittings, and you can reuse them, and the vacuum is fine. So we intend to do that with a bunch of spouts that we've already put through the bleach process here. That way we won't be wasting as much, that way we won't be buying as much. Note that the pump is lower than the tank, and this is because we can have the pump flooded. I'll open the valve. It's a lot easier to prime a plug when it's pump when it's flooded. I'm gonna make sure I got liquid. I think we'll call that good. Yeah. So to see the paper getting black, this tells us we have chlorine. So this spout is full. That's done. And I can walk up this line. All right, we found we get 99% of our washing from washing below, but we leave 1% out, and that's cleaning the drops. We can clean the drops from washing below, but it's more complicated. It's much simpler to clean the drops individually. So what we have is these are wash bottles. They're available from U.S. Plastics. They're Nalgene wash bottles, and they're 1 liter wash bottles. So if we fill them up to there, we have 1 liter of water in them, which we will do. And you can also if you're out in the woods, you can obviously carry a gallon of water with you to make your refills. Theoretically, 1 liter should do about 175 drops. In reality, it doesn't. We overfill them, and some goes down the line, some spills. So we might get 50 or 60. If I take 1/8 teaspoon, level it off, put it in there, put it in there. You don't want to mix water with this dry stuff. Could be very bad. Stir it up really good so we mix it. We have the scientific white pine stirring rod from a tree that grew here. And we like to see most of it in solution. You might find a few particles down there. Now, put this in a pocket and clean with the solution by blowing it up from down below. We are going to just clean the drops. These stick on a little too well. Generally, you wouldn't have to change spouts if this works the way it's supposed to work, because this stuff should clean the spouts too. We weren't satisfied with the spouts we used. These were either two-piece spouts, or they were polycarbonate spouts. We found the two-piece spouts were completely unsatisfactory, and the polycarbonate spouts would tend to get brittle after the first year. So we're replacing these with, these are D&G black plastic spouts. We like them very much. There must be other spouts that will work just as well. We can leave this in our pocket. We want to bring the line to be about the same level. The idea is to fill and have it fill up. If you have it like this, it'll tend to empty out. And the idea is we need to have contact of the solution with the line as far as possible. Now, you can't get this completely filled up, but everything is wetted with the solution, and I think that has to be good enough. So you just put it on here and press it in. And you can see, I don't know if you can see it going on the picture, but it's flowing down the tube and down this, and it's pretty much full. Some will spill out. All right, it's important to be able to do this efficiently. This year we did it after the season was closed, and it was pretty much a learning curve for us. But this is a schedule that, if this proves successful, remember we haven't seen it go through a season yet. If this proves successful and increases our yield next year, this is how we'll do it. After the season's over, we'll run up and take the end drop, detap the end drop so that liquid can flow all the way up the laterals easily, all the end drops. And then we will start by putting the endochlor solution in the main lines and laterals. Just pump it up and clean everything out really well. Then we will detap, and as we detap, we will take our Nalgene wash bottles and clean the drops. Then at the end of the summer, we will go up and wash the laterals and the main lines like we did before. This way we will not spend a lot of extra time in the woods. Every time you make a tree visit, you know, we love our trees and we want to hug them, of course, but every time you make a tree visit, it takes time. And if you've got thousands of tree visits to make, you're going to spend considerable time doing it. So you don't want to make too many. So doing them when you detap seems to be a logical way of doing it. And this cleaning can be done without a great deal of effort. It's handy to have more than one person down at the pump station pumping, and another person or two people up in the woods seeing what's going on in the end taps. Walkie-talkies are mighty useful. Walkie-talkies are somewhat limited in range, so you may need to have a person, an intermediate person, if you got a long way to go, relaying messages to you so you can find out what's happening. The object, of course, when you first put the solution in the line, is to get the solution up to the end of the line, and you do that by reading it with that hydron paper we were talking about. Once you see that black, that line's okay. The advantage of doing it in the beginning, at the end of the season, the system should be pretty well intact. You shouldn't have leaks anywhere. This is probably as good as it's going to be, so you won't spend time running around looking for things. The advantage of rinsing at the end of the summer or at the beginning of the fall is that some of the damage, maybe squirrel damage, deer damage, whatever damage you're going to have in the lines has occurred, and you'll be able to use that same time to go through to correct those, because obviously if you don't have liquid coming off at the top, there's something wrong in between, and you can find it out. So this is making the best use of your time. Good luck. We want to thank some people for helping us with this. And this is especially to Steve Childs at Cornell and Abby Vandenberg at Proctor Center at UVM. I also want to thank Tim Perkins at Proctor Center, and also Tim Wilmot, who used to work for Proctor, but now works for D&G. These have all been very helpful in preparation of this. We'll see how successful we are.